Well, hi again everybody, welcome to my latest video. Well, does this PC look familiar? It's my current backup editing rig. So this PC, I've always wanted to make it a little bit faster. I had picked those parts because they were the most cost effective at the time. As you recall, it has a Ryzen 2700X. Well, I'm going to be upgrading it. I have right here the boxes for the motherboard, which is a B450 Tomahawk, and the RX 580 from a company called Power Color. And this is where I'm going to put those parts. Now, it probably won't fit in this box, the motherboard with the cooler on it, and I may leave the cooler on it. I may not be taking that off at this point. We'll see. The new board that's going in there will not have Ryzen cooler, the standard cooler that comes with it. I'll be putting on there an aftermarket cooler, which is a bit more powerful. I haven't decided which one yet, so I won't be showing you that part right now, but I will be putting it on as I start populating the motherboard. Let me go over some of the parts now that are going to go into the upgrade. And basically everything is going to come out of this PC except for, obviously, the case is going to remain the same. The Leon Leaf fans, the RGB fans that I have in here, those will be staying. The additional RGB strip that I put in the power supply area, that'll stay. And the hard drive, the 2 terabyte Seagate hard drive that I have in here for data storage purposes, that'll stay as well. However, everything else will come out. So here are the new parts that'll be going in. Start off with the motherboard. The motherboard is an ASUS B550F gaming motherboard with Wi-Fi capability. It's the Rogue Strix board. The CPU will be the Ryzen 3700 CPU. So we're going to go up to the next level in terms of a Ryzen 3rd generation. The memory that I put in is this G.Skill Riptide 3200 megahertz, which will be an improvement over the Corsair 3000 megahertz that I currently have in that PC. And I'll be upgrading the existing approximately 500 gigabyte SSD that I currently have in there to this 1 terabyte Silicon Power, a very fast M2 NVMe drive. This will go as far as, I believe, 3200 kilobits per second transfer rate, as opposed to the existing SSD drive in there, which is probably about 560 maybe. So it'll be like 6 times faster. And I'll be putting in a new graphics card. The graphics card will be an ASUS Rogue Strix again, and this will be their GTX 1660 Super. And then finally, I'll be putting in, this is the Corsair CX650 power supply. Not modular, not even partially modular, but that's not needed in this case. There's plenty of room in that case for the extra cables. I wanted to go with the higher power supply because these are higher powered components. The one that's currently in there right now, as I recall, is an EVGA 600 power supply. Now that'll stay with the other components. When I transfer it, and this is where the rub is on this whole build, all the parts that come out of here will be going into my next build. In the next build, I have extra cases. I have 2 in particular that they will be evaluated by my son. And I believe he was concerned about the glass components. So we may not have one that has real glass. It'll probably be one of the ones that has just a plastic side panel, as opposed to this one, which is real tempered glass. Because this is meant for his son. They live down in North Carolina, and he's starting 1st grade soon. And he needs a computer because the current world situation, especially down in North Carolina right now, they'll be doing all remote learning to start with. And he needs a computer in order to do that. That's really what the insides of this one are meant to go. So this is really a 2-build project here. So hopefully you get something out of this. And if you do, please consider subscribing to my channel. It would be very helpful for the growth of this channel and allow me to do things like this more often. Let's get started. We're going to populate the motherboard next. Okay, I'm getting ready to populate the motherboard, but before I get started, I did pick out the cooler that I'll be using. And that cooler will be this leftover Cooler Master Hyper 212 RGB Black Edition. Now this is one that I had pulled out of my daughter's PC, as some of you may recall, and we put the actual all-in-one cooler, liquid cooler, into that instead because of that particular case being such a problem in terms of cooling. I don't expect that same problem with this case, however. Okay, let's see. We got the motherboard here. Let me first open up the CPU. It's an actual box opening in a way because I didn't open up these boxes yet. So I'll open up that one. And really all we want is a CPU out of this, because I'm not going to use the cooler that came with it. So we'll just leave that in the package. So I think everything that I need is right here. And we have a regular Ryzen 3700X CPU. This guy up. We got everything we need in here. Okay, so that's the CPU. Let me open up the motherboard. Same thing, I haven't opened this one up yet. So let me get the knife out. There we go. We'll see what's in here. What is this? Oh, that's the wireless antenna, which I don't think we'll be using it at first, so it might just wind up staying in this box until further notice. It's good to have that. The thing, by the way, I'm gonna double check that when I look at it, it's supposed to have, this motherboard that is, it's supposed to have a 2.5 gigahertz LAN adapter to it, just one. Now I don't have anything beyond the 1 gigahertz right now, so that's not going to benefit me, but when I upgrade it to a 10 gigabit, if I want to temporarily save on network cards, I don't have to buy the 10 gig one for this. It'll go at its full speed in a 10 gigabit LAN. And what we got in here, this is standard stuff. Got the manual, a thank you card, some stickers, a whole bunch of stickers. 4 SATA power cables, 2 of them straight and 2 of them 90 degree. A 3-pin RGB connector. So if I go ARGB, the 3-pin 5 volts, this is a cable to help us adapt that to fan that has a 3-pin connector on it. This we need, this is for the M2 drives, I'll leave that out. These are like rubber pads. I'll have to look and see what they're for. I'll leave them out for now. And then what I can always use is some tie wraps. So I'll leave this stuff in here for now. And of course, it comes with a DVD. This computer does not going to have a DVD, but I have an external DVD reader if I needed to. But I'm going to download this stuff from online anyway. I'm not going to do it through the DVD. I'll put that in there, and I'll leave the manual out to help me with the pins. And I'll leave the box out for now, because I'm going to use this to build the motherboard on. In fact, let me go ahead and put this in right now. This is a static-free mat, as you may recall. You've seen previous videos of mine. Now the box itself is anti-static, so I'll be building on top of the box. So I'll leave this out for now. What's nice about this motherboard is it comes with the built-in I/O shield, so I don't have to worry about getting an I/O shield into the case. Let's start putting stuff together here. I'm also going to be using a different type of thermal paste. This is recommended by a friend of the channel that has told me that this is probably the best that there is, MX4. So I'll try it on this build. I've had this for a while now. This is the first build that I'll be trying it on. And it's currently an unopened thermal paste. I think you unscrew this, yeah. Well, the first thing is going to be the CPU. I like to look at the socket very carefully. I have a flashlight here. Now it's not as bad, it's not as difficult with the AMD type. If this was a Intel, I'd be looking at all the pins. I'm going to be doing that on the AMD CPU though in a minute. But I still like to make sure there's nothing in there, no bent plastic around any of the pins. I just like to give it the once over. Now this one has 2 M2 slots. It's got this one here, which is the one that can actually go Gen 4. And this second one here is just a Gen 3. Now I'm going to go ahead, even though I only have a Gen 3, I'm going to put it in this slot here. Let me get the CPU out of its case. Now this has the pins on it, which I'm going to examine very carefully and make sure that there's no damaged pins on it. I always do that. If they're in a socket for Intel, I'll do it there. And for AMD, I will do it on the chip itself. So I like to get this and do a real view. I like to reflect the light in both directions and try to see if there's any shadows on any of those pins. I do not hold the flashlight right over it, because if it drops out of my hand, I don't want to ruin it. So I just go around, I'll look at it this way, and then I'll turn it around and look at it this way. And I'm just looking for any shadows on the pins that might exist, and making sure that there's no bent pins there, and I don't see any. The first thing I have to do is open up the socket. You push this out to the side, and then you pull it straight up. That opens the pins up by holding this straight up. Now you got to be aware of where the arrow is. And the arrow right now is in this corner right here. That's where I see it. Let me double check with the manual and make sure that that's where it was expected. It's always good to double check. So I'll go to where you install the CPU and we look at it. The motherboard comes with an AMD socket, AM4 for 3rd generation. and it shows you the emblem on the AMD processor going that way. That's important to note. So the emblem has to be this way, sideways, which sort of makes sense because this is where the arrow is. And I bet you when I look at the CPU chip, which I'm going to carefully take out and hold very, very carefully, I will probably see that the arrow, in this case it's a little dot right here, the little arrow right there in silver, it's on that same corner. So this is the way it's got to go in. So you got to get it inside of the socket very, very carefully, and there should be no resistance. It should slide right in just like that. I like to take it and wiggle it in both directions to make sure it's seated, and then I close the socket and put it back underneath that little plastic tab right there. So that is the CPU installed into the motherboard. Now before I put the cooler on, which will come in a little bit, I'm going to clean this off with some 99% isopropyl alcohol. And I do have some down on my shelves, so I'll go get it in a bit. So what I'll do is I'll remove this heatsink. That's nice. Looks like they did captured screws on this. Yeah, captured screws. That's really a nice feature. So I just pull this off. Now this has a thermal pad on it. So after I put the M2 drive in there, I got to make sure I remove this plastic protector here. Otherwise the thermal pad will not make good contact with the M2 drive. Let's open this guy out. Take this M2 out. Now don't take the stickers off of this, unfortunately. The stickers, there's all sorts of warnings all over the place about warranty void if you remove the stickers. I wish I could so you can get the heatsink right on the chip, but I'll just adhere to that for now. And the socket that we want to go into is right here. So we have to push it into the socket at a 45 degree, and then we sort of just push it in place until the lands disappear into the socket. And then you see it's all the way over here is where we're going to need the actual spacer. So I'll take it out again. We need a spacer added to this one, and there's a screw, and they're both in this package here. So let me open up this package. There's 2 screws and 2 spacers in this package. So the first thing you need to do is put the spacer in. It goes in this N1. This is a full length. I usually just make it finger tight. It doesn't have to be super tight on there. We need to put the screw in. Magnetic screwdriver helps, as I've said many times in the past. So we put this on the end of the magnetic. So this is particularly helpful when putting an M2 drive in. You push this down until it hits that, and then you put the screw in. And you don't make it super tight, just snug, like that. So now the M2 is. Now what I also like to do, and I might as well get it done now, I like to put the second spacer that I have and the screw into the other M2 slot so I don't lose it. So let me quickly, just takes a minute. I won't take the thermal pad cover off on this one, however. Okay, so now I have the screw saved if I put a second M2 in here. Or someday if I decide, which is possible, get a PCIe Gen 4 in this slot and then move this one over there. I'll be able to do that. So now time to put this heatsink back, but for this one, I've got to take the cooling, the actual protector off like that. So once that's done, you just take this and put it in place. Try not to drop it on the motherboard. Be very, very careful about that. It's pretty heavy, it can damage it. Now the M2 is in. The next thing I want to do is put the memory in. Well, actually what I'm going to do is, I don't want to put the memory in yet. I'm going to have to change these socket braces for this particular cooler, right? So let me do that now. Let me take this cooler out of its package. Okay, I've got the 99% alcohol. I've got some paper towels, and I'm ready to clean stuff off. I'm going to start by cleaning the platen, this part right here on the cooler. Take some alcohol on it. Again, why do we use alcohol, especially the high concentrated alcohol? Because it dries very quickly, and that way we don't have any wet residue lying around. I'll clean the CPU right before we put this on. I just wanted to get this clean now. So that should be all nice and polished now. Now, I suggest, as I've shown in previous videos on, get all your parts laid out. These Cooler Master books tell you exactly, depending on the type of socket you have, what parts you need from this whole parts list. And there are different parts, whether it's Intel or AMD. Last time this cooler was installed, it was on an Intel 115X type socket. Now it's on an AM4. So these are the parts that I have laid out right here, right now. I've got the same brackets used. This is the same. These are different. These are bigger ones because now we're going to go on to the bigger part of this. These are different brackets too. The ones we had before were curved. These are straight. So we have to, and all the rest of the stuff was the same, these screws. Turn this around this way so you can see it a little bit better as I put the memory in. Now generally the memory will go in the outer two ones if you only have two of the four. So what I'll do is I'll double check in the manual. Always a good thing to do. So here's the layout of the different slots where they should go. So when you only have two, which is what we have, they got to go into DIMMs A2 and B2 according to this middle choice right here. If there was only one, it would only go into B2. Well, we have A2 and B2. Now there should be labeling on the motherboard on one side or the other to show you which is which. I'm sure it's there, but here it is. They give a little diagram here. So this is B2 and this is A2, the two outer ones, just like I thought. Pull the memory DIMMs out of here. So I got the two memory DIMMs. Here's the Ripjaw memory. Notice that there's not equal spacing. This one is shorter than that half. So this notch is offset. If you look at the sockets, it's the same thing. The sockets have the same thing. This bottom one here is shorter than the top one. So the memory has to go in this way. I like to put the inner one in first. I'll open up all of them. One side is stationary in some of the really new motherboards like this one, but the other side opens up. So we want to have it stationary, we push it in, make sure that the slot lines up appropriately. Let me show you that. Make sure that the slot lines up appropriately. And once we have that, we just push it straight down. And you should hear two clicks, like that. Same thing with this one. Now we'll put the outer one. Make sure that the smaller one's on that side. Push it into the socket straight down, not cocked in any way. Get it in there, and it should just go. That one didn't feel good. Let me try that one again. If it doesn't feel good, take a look at it, make sure we didn't damage anything, and then try again. We should hear two nice clicks. There we go. That was better. Now we can actually hold it by the cooler too, because that's nice and solid on there. Memory's on, CPU's in, M2 is in. Let's put the fan on. So there is two connectors on this fan. One is for the RGB and one is for the fan itself to the motherboard. The motherboard fan is on this side over here. Turn this around, see what I mean? So according to this, let's see if it says it. It does, usually what they do is they put it in funny places. So one says CPU fan and CPU option. So this first one is the CPU fan, that's the CPU option. That's an RGB connector. I'm not going to connect it to the motherboard RGB right now, because when we put it in the case, we're not going to be using the motherboard RGB. But I will connect the fan to the appropriate connector here. But let me get it connected first. You got to push it on this way. Now I should have cleared the memory well. So we just take this and we just sort of press it in place. And it doesn't interfere at all, which is perfect. That's what I wanted to see. And you got to push it in until it locks. Try to get the top and bottom equally spread from it. And you should have the sides go right in. And then the one that we want to put in here will be the one for the fan, and it goes into the first one. So it plugs in over here, and now the fan is connected. Put a tie wrap up here so we don't get in the way. I'll tie this out of the way for now by just putting it up into this empty hole. And I'll put one more tie wrap, and this will be a permanent one. That'll cut off later. This one here, I want to be able to tie this up into a nice little package here. This is our first cable management of the new computer. So that's completely out of the way now. Let me cut off the excess from both of those. Cut this one off and cut this one off. Don't cut the cables, they're all black. It's very easy to make a mistake on that. And this is ready to go. The motherboard now is complete, and I can have it ready for when I put it into the case.